Excited to be here. My name is Yuri Zarumba. I'm a senior product design manager at eBay. And I'm here today to talk about design thinking, and I'm going to be focusing more specifically on the ideation kind of phase of the design thinking process. Anyone that's comfortable, feel free to unmute your faces just so I can see body language and facial reactions and stuff. A little bit about myself before I get into the meat of the talk is I've been fortunate to get a pretty wide array of experience. As I mentioned today, I'm at eBay, but I was also at Facebook for a couple of years and Amazon for 7 years and Microsoft before that. And what that means is when I was at Facebook, you know, the design process that I'll be sharing today contributed to increasing Facebook revenue over 6%. It contributed to launching a brand new cloud gaming product at Amazon, as well as Amazon's first ever health wearable. And during my time at Echo, I'll be sharing some tips that contributed to me getting to patent the setup process for the Amazon Echo smart speaker. I got an FCC accessibility award for my work on the Kindle, and some design awards when I was at Microsoft. And as I mentioned earlier, today I want to talk about design thinking and the process that comes with it. First question I wanted to ask the group is, how many folks are familiar with the double diamond? If you are, can you give me like a little hand emoji or something? No one. All right. Well, one person. So the double diamond in the user experience practice is a very common design process that's used. Okay, more than one person. Great. To diverge and converge, and then converge again on a solution. So the idea is that on the left side of the diamond, you're doing your discovery, and then on the right side, you're doing execution. Really, you know, I wanted to talk about, okay, like we have the double diamond now. In practice, like how do you actually execute on it in like in a practical way? And for our chat today, I wanted to introduce this group to the design thinking microcycle. And the microcycle is sometimes it's 5 things, but I love to put an emphasis on the third point here that you're seeing, which is point of view. And we'll be talking about that today in our chat. So the design microcycle contains understand, observe, point of view, ideate, prototype, and test. And I'll be going through each of these one by one. So starting with understand, and actually before I even get into it, I'm going to be trying something a little bit different in this talk. Instead of treating it like a lecture, I'm effectively going to just be giving you guys a bunch of tips. I'm not going to be cover everything exhaustively. I'm not going to be the smartest guy in the room here, but I thought that I could provide a lot of value in this talk today just by giving you guys a bunch of like tips connected to each of these steps based on my experience as a practitioner. So first, understand. So the first thing that I wanted to pass on to the group is make sure that when you're picking a problem to actually solve, that you're teasing out the embedded problems from the large problem. So if you think about the large problem as a completed Rubik's Cube, right? Every face of that Rubik's Cube is really an embedded problem. So an example that I can give you of this is when I was working on the Amazon Echo, we had a lot of requirements that that we were trying to execute upon for like making a product turn on, like smart home devices turn on, making making music play quickly from like a smart speaker that's paired to the Echo. Like there were a bunch of use cases, right? But the one large problem that we decided to hone in on was to make device setup as seamless as possible across the board. So that meant like initial setup of the speaker. That meant connecting to any other speakers. That meant connecting a light bulb to the speaker. Like that was the large problem that we decided to focus in on, and that enabled us to kind of like ignore a lot of the other noise of like tempting other big problems to solve. So all the embedded problems ended up rolling up into that large goal. So my first tip for you guys is like, you know, when you choose your thesis, you know, like make sure that there's like a large problem that you're solving and that you're not losing sight of that. And that's what you're measuring your success against. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is like make sure that you're optimizing for someone specific. So sometimes that's a persona. I wanted to share today that it's not always a persona. Like something that was really helpful when we were evaluating smart home use cases for Alexa at Amazon was instead of kind of creating a person persona to guide our thinking of our customer, we picked a scenario, and the scenario that we decided to hone in on was kind of like the stereotypical American home. And it didn't mean that we weren't going to be addressing use cases in other scenarios, but we had kind of like that key golden scenario that we that we wanted to make sure was particularly magical. So that's my second tip to the group for understand is just, you know, have either someone specific in mind, or a contact or a context or a scenario that's specific, that's connected to your problem, so that for someone that you're solving for, you're creating like a magical experience. It should still work across other segments, right? But make sure that there's at least a specific optimized segment for whom the experience is magical. Second thing I wanted to, the second step is observe. And the example that I wanted to kind of use for this step is during my time at Facebook, I led the design of the launch of Facebook's first fully automated ads product, which sounds boring, but it was actually very complicated. And there were actually, it was a super complex product, a lot of different types of customers, a lot of different touch points of different people being involved in publishing a single ad. So in order to untangle all that, right, we did a lot of customer interviews and pulled together a customer journey. Some of you might have already seen some version of a customer journey. There's no one template for it, but it really helped us identify particular pain points to focus on, and that ended up painting the our point of view, which I'll talk about next. But like here, you could see that, you know, the campaign strategy and setup stages had and ad creation had very acute points where the experience dipped. So you know, think about your end-to-end customer journeys as they're going to be using your products, and then through talking to your customers and collecting data and getting as many inputs as you can, right? Like make sure that you have an understanding of specifically what problems you're going to be going out and solving in that bigger journey. Next, and I'd probably say my most favorite step lately is build a point of view. And this, I'd say, is really where more junior design and engineer practitioners kind of become journeyman and become more senior, is whether or not they can build a real point of view. And what building a point of view means is, before you get into the creative, before you get into your sketching and like exploration of how to solve the problem, use words before pixels. Like, have an actual hypothesis. So based off of your understanding, right? Like and the insights that you glean from talking to your customers and interviewing people and collecting data and learning about competitors, right? After doing all that input gathering, right? Like, on the other side of that, you should actually have come up with a hypothesis. Like, what is it that you're going to be going and trying to do? So what I'm sharing here is before. So I was the design lead for a period of time for Alexa Wellness, which ended up launching their health wearable, and now is used in hospitals and different other contexts. Before I got into any of the creative or trying to figure out how Alexa actually works, I aligned with our VP and all the way up to Jeff Bezos on what is it that we're going to go and try and do. So here you could see that the statement was: Alexa educates, motivates, helps customers take the first step in forming habits to achieve and maintain a healthier lifestyle. So the actual VP of Alexa for this segment, adopted this as a kind of guide for what we were going to do next. No creative had been done yet at this point, right? But here you can see I unpacked what encouragement means, what good habits means, what results means, and what confidence means based off of that statement. So use words first, form a hypothesis, have an idea of what you're going to go out and get after that's based off of your insights to create a point of view. And another example of that is, again, at Facebook, I used the same process to change our point of view, because there was already a point of view. We changed the point of view for how our seller tools should work. This isn't the exact wording because I had to redact it just for confidentiality, but you guys get the idea, right? Like, start designing in words before you do so in pixels. And then once you've got that broad point of view, that's when you want to start narrowing down and getting more specific. And with your point of view, with your broad point of view in place, right? Something that will kind of establish your guardrails to make sure that you're going down the right direction and going to execute upon that point of view is establishing your guardrails or your design principles. So I say guardrails because that's kind of like the mental picture that comes into my head, but more commonly, these are known as design principles or sometimes design tenets. And these principles should be how you are going to execute upon that point of view. And they should just be statements that at least someone that you will interview will find controversial. They can't just be like, we'll create a delightful experience or something, right? Like, no one's going to disagree with that. It has to be something that narrows your focus. And then once you've done, once you've set your point of view using words, then you can actually get into the creative and start ideating. And when I ideate, here's an example of an ideation exercise that I went through at Facebook Ads Manager. At the end of the day, like, I think this ended up having like 14 different artboards of different ways to solve this specific problem. Go broad. Like, you've got your point of view and your design principle, so your subconscious is loaded. But other than that, like, you should just go into it unfettered and just like go and get as much inspiration as you can around analogous experiences that might be physical or digital on a screen, right? Like, here you could see that I explored gauges, funnels, balancing beams, quadrants. You get the point, right? Like just go super broad, just go nuts on it. Try to come up with as many different ways to solve the problem as possible. And then, based off of the point of view that you had set earlier and the design principles that you set, and and like any relevant, whether stakeholders or clients or whatever, that you can put it in front of to gather more feedback and data. Systematically focus on eliminating down to 2, 3, 4 concepts that you actually want to move forward with and to continue to evaluate. I want to park on this one for a second because it's, I'd say that this is probably my secret sauce, and why across my 12-year career now, I've been able to do really well in like emerging technology, ambiguous new product spaces, is because I always focus on eliminating ideas, not picking an idea. Never pick an idea, right? You want to go through a systematic process of elimination until the only thing that's left is the thing that makes sense. It shouldn't just be the thing that your quote unquote your gut tells you is the right thing to do. And then once you do narrow down, make sure that what is left are your best conceptual models. So your conceptual model is what is how you are, is the model within which you want your customer to understand your product. There's also a customer mental model, so there's no guarantee that your conceptual model is how they'll understand it. But you should still be intentional about how you want the customer to understand it. So in this case, what I'm sharing here is when I was working on Amazon's cloud gaming platform, in latter stages of identifying the right way to go, we shook it out to 3 specific conceptual models. One which was like, okay, well, we'll do something that leans into existing gaming consoles, so your PlayStations and Xboxes, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do another conceptual model that leans into social media and Twitch, because Amazon owns Twitch, and it continues down that model. And then the third model was to lean into streaming, because Amazon also had Prime Video, so like we'll make it more of a video model. And when you're doing that conceptual model level of ideation, right, when you're getting to that level of like the rubber's really hitting the road, you've only got a couple options left, make sure that your ideation is happening at a single elevation. And what I mean by that is if you can picture a hot air balloon, right, like your ideas can be super tactical, meaning low to the ground. So an example might be, well, we could it'll be like Uber, but actually that's a bad example. If let's say you're creating like a smart home interface, something low to the ground would be like, we'll take something like Samsung Smart Things, but we'll add a couple more options, right? That's extremely tactical. That's kind of like low level. But for the same kind of scenario of like a smart home interface, you could also say something that's too high in the sky, like it'll be a remote control that controls everything, right? Like it's not specific enough to be useful. You want to pick a level in which all of your conceptual models are flying at the same elevation, right? So that when you put them side by side with each other, like in my example here, like you can evaluate them at the same level. And then don't get overly tempted to dive straight into like high fidelity just because your design tools, enable you to do so. Consider sticking to a lower fidelity to force yourself to think at that conceptual level before you invest too much time into like increasing the fidelity of your ideas. So when I did my first VP reviews for for Amazon's cloud gaming product, it was actually at the fidelity of what you're seeing on the left. Even though a lot of the time it's really tempting for people just to go straight to a VP with what's shown here on the right. But we tried to make sure to have our conversations, reflect the maturity of the concept, right? So we're just starting out, so there's no point in showing really shiny stuff. And it's also just more efficient and kind of like narrowing down your ideas when you don't have to invest hours and hours in polishing up an idea before you eliminate it. Another tip is lean into your constraints, right? Like as you get more specific about the type of problems you want to solve, you'll identify constraints that are specific to that problem space, right? Like if you're trying to redesign, navigating Tokyo's train system, you need to lean into the constraints of the interfaces that are present for ticket purchasing, but also the actual physical rails, right? Like those are physical constraints. So consider what like the physics are of the problem space that you're going to be working inside of, and then lean into them. So some examples that I'm sharing here are, one is, sorry, it's supposed to be a little video playing thing. Okay, well, the one on the left is supposed to have a cute smiley face animated. So the one on the left has a very primitive LED. Maybe I'll just, there we go. I wanted to share that because it's cute. But that one has a very primitive LED matrix as opposed to a screen. So we leaned into like visibly seeing every detail of the LEDs and like the lights and the boxes those LEDs were inside of, to give it personality and make it like look unique, and like by leaning into the physics of the LED matrix, we were able to emphasize where the LEDs were stronger and where they were weaker. And another example is when I was working on the Echo Show, again, like this is a fairly early stage in working on smart home for the Echo Show. We didn't first launch with the ability to actually control from the screen. So we wanted to, so we ended up leaning into voice much harder, and then using the screen as an opportunity to educate how to do these things for the first time ever. Because when we launched the Echo Show with smart home functionality, it was the first time ever, in history that you would be using your voice to both set up a smart home device, because you would just twist in your light bulb and say, Alexa, discover devices. She'd find it, and now we have to explain to you how to turn on this light bulb that you just screwed in. So we came up with a whole like system for how to do that. And lastly, for ideation, I'd encourage you to think in phases. I primarily work on software. I've done some hardware, but mostly software. So this is coming from that point of view. But I wanted to share with you guys an example of what happens when you don't think in phases. So I worked on a product called Amazon Author Central about midway through my career at Amazon, and it was desktop only. It was it was a legacy experience. It was dated, and the goal was to get it to be a mobile first experience. And I changed so much stuff around about like the architecture and the creative and the brand, and all the different interactions, that by the time engineers actually started to work on it, they were building a whole new product. And what was originally supposed to be a 6-month project ended up taking 2 years. So for me, it was a huge learning, to think incrementally about like, how can you get to where you want to be in phases so you're still making progress before that 2-year mark, right? There's probably an in-between phase that we could have done to ship a product in a year earlier, and then get to that end state, the same end state, but your customers are not waiting for 2 years. Next in the process is prototype. And when you're prototyping, beyond just adding motion and making it feel good and validating to yourself that the thing works, use it as an opportunity to stress test your solutions, right? So as you're prototyping it, think about what can go wrong, like what are the cases in which my proposed solution is going to be the most challenged. So with using Echo Show as an example, for smart home use cases, this was the thermostat, because there's so many variations of how a thermostat can work that this ended up becoming kind of the main place where we stress tested, because you can have multiple, fuel, you can have dual fuel, right? Like what happens if you've both got a heat pump and you've got a furnace? What happens when you're operating on a range? Because some thermostats don't just have you pick 72 degrees, they say 68 to 74 degrees, right? Like there's all these hairy cases. So make sure that you're thinking about, when we were working on this, we called it our obstacle course. Like what kind of obstacle course can you create for your product to prove that it's resilient? And just to close the loop on the point of view thing, get conviction in your hypothesis. Like close the loop on your point of view. When we were getting close to launching the beta of Amazon's cloud gaming platform, Amazon Luna, our hypothesis was all about just like getting into gameplay as quickly as possible, and we got customer feedback back around that being, and we were able to validate that we were heading in the right direction. So like what you're seeing here in the background video is that's actually the introduction to the single player campaign for Metro Exodus. So like once you actually tapped into it, you were already several minutes into gameplay and you could just jump straight in. That was leaning into the constraint of how games actually work. They had to boot up, they had to ramp up, all that stuff. And it enabled us to, explore getting into gameplay faster, which was also a unique value proposition. And lastly, test it. I'd say just get feedback at every level. So we, like at Facebook, we got, when I was testing that automated advertising product, right? Like I was getting feedback about this control, about how these modules stacked, about this new concept that I introduced, which was like guiding the customers to understand what they were selecting. What does this mean versus this mean? Make sure to get both broad and tactical feedback. And that concludes my presentation today. Again, I'm Yuri Zarumba. find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram at UX Candor, where I mostly post like video tips having to do with design. And visit me at www.zrmba.com, where you can get mentorship, learn about my design community. We've got over 16,000 people at this point, and view video and PDF content. And one last thing before I shift gears into Q&A, as I think I mentioned earlier, I'm Ukrainian. And on that topic, please consider donating to www.mercyukraine.org. I won't get into what's going on there. You guys all know about it, but consider donating. This is the organization that I've been supporting. And on that note, we can shift gears into Q&A.